Annie, bonsoir, good evening, and welcome to a special meeting of council for a zoning amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. I need a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda. Dave and Renee. All those in favor? Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Seeing none, we'll move on to the applications. So this evening, this is a public hearing scheduled for 2 zoning bylaw amendments. The Planning Act requires that a public hearing be held before council decides whether or not to pass a zoning bylaw amendment. The public hearing serves 2 purposes. First, to present to council and the public the details and background to a proposed rezoning. And second, to receive comments from the public and agencies before a council decision is made. Monsieur Dumont will provide a summary of the applications. From there, the applicant will be requested to make a presentation virtually, followed by questions from the public virtually, either in favor or against the proposal. Council will then have the opportunity to question the applicant, the director of planning, or anyone giving presentation. The zoning bylaw amendment will then be considered by council later this evening. Monsieur Dumont, would you please advise how the public notice was provided?
There we go. Sorry. Notice of public hearing was posted in the municipal office and was sent by mail to the assessed owners within 120 meters of the property subject to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment this evening, and to those persons and agencies likely to have an interest in the application. The notices were sent on January 16th, 2023, being over 20 days prior to this evening's meeting. Included with the notice was an explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application and a key map showing the location of the subject property.
Thank you. And I declare this portion of the hearing to be a public hearing to deal with application number ZBA 22-20 F.R. Allen and Brenda Cochine. Monsieur Dumont, will you please summarize the purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to this application?
So this evening, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application also had a severance application. So there are 2 applications together. And the planning board heard on February 9th, which was last Thursday, the proposed severances. So just to give a little bit of context to council this evening, the planning board approved the severances. So we're here this evening now to review the zoning or the change in use for the land. And so I'll provide a little bit of context on that. But before I do, I'll give you the location of the subject property. So the lands are located on the north side of Highway 64 and west of Delamere Road. The subject property is adjacent to a settlement area known as the Village of Alban in the municipality of French River. The settlement area consists of a range of land uses, including residential, commercial, institutional, and rural. So the intent on February 9th planning board meeting was the creation of 5 residential rural lots on Delamere Road. Let me clarify, sorry, rural lots on Delamere Road. And the intent this evening for the zoning bylaw amendment application, the applicants or the owners retained Tulloch Engineering, who is part of this public hearing this evening. I believe Kevin Jarvis is participating in this meeting tonight. So the owners retained planning professionals on this application. And part of that pre-consultation was to conduct an ecological site assessment for the property. Because if you notice, if you look at aerial imagery, you'll see that there are wetlands on the subject property. A good portion of the property contains natural wetlands. So upon their due diligence of investigation of the site, Tulloch Engineering provided the planning board an ecological site assessment of those wetlands. And it was determined based on the recommendations of that report there was a total of 4 wetlands. Wetland number 1 was to the southmost extent of the property. Wetland 2 consisted of 2 distinct wetland plant communities. Wetland 3 consisted of 2 distinct wetland plant communities. And the last wetland number 4, was located near the northmost extent of the property. Now, the intent of wetlands is basically, in our official plan, is the goal is to protect these significant and sensitive features and functions. So that was the justification and rationale behind the ecological site assessment and having that conducted. And as a result of that report being completed by a biologist, that's where they identified these 4 wetlands. And as a result of identifying these 4 wetlands, they provided recommendations in the report. And I'll just touch on a few recommendations just to share you what was in that report. So to give you an example, one of the recommendations was that no new development or clearing of vegetation is undertaken within the wetlands, and that all such work set back at least 30 meters from the wetlands edge. So that was one of the recommendations. Another one was that no aggregates be stockpiled within 30 meters of the wetland edge. Another one was fuels, lubricants, solvents, paints, toxic stuff not be stored within 30 meters of the wetland. So you get a context and understanding that the intent and purpose is to have a buffer, a minimum buffer with these 4 different wetlands at least 30 meters. So part of the ongoing discussions I had internally with the consultants in our office was to try to find a solution to acknowledge these recommendations and also look at some past examples. So what I mean by that, in the past, people would bring zoning bylaw amendment applications to council, and they would add these regulations, and the regulations that would be added would be the recommendations, just like I kind of touched on for a few. In total, there are 7 recommendations in that report. So this time around, I took a different approach, and I proposed that rather than having these regulations, which can be very restrictive, and it does deter people from buying properties in the future because they don't want to deal with all these regulations. That's from experience of past examples. So this time around, to not deter people from wanting to buy a lot, to build on it, the special provision for the zoning bylaw this evening is that should anybody wish to buy one of these lots, they're going to enter into site plan agreement. And that'll forward the chief building official to then look at these recommendations. So when somebody does put a sketch together with their home, detached garage, or gazebo, any structures, that chief building official will have the information of this report and ensure that the placement of those structures would not infringe on those setbacks. So that's the intent there. That site plan would be facilitated on one of these 4 lots or 5 lots that have been created. So again, in terms of zoning, the zoning is going to be maintained. So the whole property is zoned rural. So the rural zone will be maintained. It will just add a regulation that site plan control be part of any future development on these lots. And the reason for that is to review these recommendations or outcomes from the biologist. And the ultimate goal here is to protect, like I said earlier, to protect the significance and sensitive features of these functions of these wetlands. That's the goal here. Now, with respect to agency comments, the municipality of French River provided comments, and they had no concerns in relation to the application. They did have comments with respect to the severance, which again doesn't pertain to this evening's meeting. The severance was just regarding the conditions regarding parkland dedication and any road transfers of Delamere Road. And we did receive supportive comments from the Sudbury District Health Unit. Again, for the severance application, we received that were supportive. Bell Canada and the Ministry of Transportation provided supportive comments in principle. And with respect to the public, we didn't receive any objections or concerns from neighboring property owners in the area. So with that said, and all the information provided to council this evening, that the application, in my professional planning opinion, is consistent with our provincial legislation and conforms to our local policy framework, which includes the official plan and zoning bylaw for the municipality of French River, and therefore can be supported from a planning perspective.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation to make or wish to speak? I see Kevin, you're here. And I believe
Yes,
Brenda is here as well, right?
Yep,
Okay.
it's Alan.
yes. Good evening, members of council. Thank you very much. I'm Kevin Jarvis. I'm the team lead of the planning group here at Tulloch Engineering. I'll be very brief because Mr. Dumont's already outlined the application. As Mr. Dumont said, this application went in front of the planning board just last week for consent approval in principle for the actual severance of the lots that you see in the agenda package. The zoning bylaw amendment in front of council tonight is purely, I almost see it as a technical matter because it implements a protective policy which is required to, again, as Mr. Dumont outlined, protect the wetlands that are on site on the overall parcel, which is subject to severance here. An environmental report was completed, which had determined that a minimum setback of 30 meters is required. The lots as presented were designed such that they met both the zoning bylaws requirements, while also providing a buildable envelope for future dwellings outside of that 30-meter setback. Those setbacks or those buildable envelopes are shown on information that was provided to the planning board as part of this application. So certainly, again, as Mr. Dumont said, in my professional planning opinion, as a registered professional planner, this application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the city's official plan with regard to the protection of natural features as is required under, again, the provincial policy statement. I'm open to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Does Brenda, do you want to make a comment or you're okay?
No, everything's good. They covered everything.
Oh, okay. It says Brenda there. That's why.
It's Alan.
Okay, Hal. All right. Are there any members of the public online, Mel? No? Okay. Council, do you have any questions or comments to make? No? All right. Since there's no further questions, I declare this public hearing to be concluded. It's now in order for council members to make a motion and for council to consider the application. So I need a mover and a seconder to approve the application. Roger and Bob.
It is duly moved and seconded. Be it resolved that bylaw 2023-11 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-23 as amended, Alan and Brenda Koshine, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. I now declare this public hearing to be concluded. The zoning bylaw amendment, oh, I've already said that. Please be advised that there is a 20-day appeal period during which time any person or public body may, no later than 20 days after the day that the given of written notice as required by section 34-18 of the Planning Act is completed, appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal by filing with the clerk of the municipality a notice of appeal setting out the objections to the bylaw and the reasons in support of the objection, accompanied by a fee prescribed under the local planning appeal tribunal. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued or other work commenced. Thank you. So thank you, Kevin and Brenda and Alan.
Thank you.
Our thanks to council.
Our pleasure. So now I declare this portion of the hearing to be a public hearing to deal with application number ZBA 22-21 FR Aurel and Nathalie Martel. Monsieur Dumont, will you please summarize the proposed and effect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and provide any additional information and correspondence relevant to the application?
Thank you. With regards to this application this evening in front of council, This was also a concurrent application, meaning the board or the Sub-East Planning Board also heard a severance application on February 9th. And the planning board approved the severance for this application as well. So it's concurrent because the owner submitted the severance and the zoning at the same time. A little bit of context in terms of the location of the property. The subject property, again, the intent on last Thursday was to create one rural lot from the subject lands, which is located on Whitetail Road in the municipality of French River. And the severed lot is to be rezoned from rural to residential rural to recognize the intended use of the such lot. The proposed severed lot that was approved Thursday night was being proposed at 0.92 hectares in lot area with a lot frontage of 76.2 meters and is presently vacant. And with respect to the zoning requirements, zoning requirements look at it as if you have a rural property, the minimum requirement for rural, if you're severing, is 100 meters of frontage and 5 hectares, which is equivalent to about 12.5 acres of lot area. And due to the smaller size of the lot that was being proposed, it's automatically changed in land use because the residential rural zone requires a minimum of 0.8 hectares, which is just roughly about 2 acres or so at a minimum, and 60 meters of frontage, which is like around 185, 190 feet, to give you a little bit of context on that. So the proposed lot that was being proposed exceeds those minimum requirements of the residential rural zone. And so that's why this evening it's being brought forth to council to recognize the intended use of the lot, which is no longer rural, which is now more of like an estate lot, which would be considered a residential rural lot. So that's the intent tonight, to switch the rural zone to a residential rural zone. And when we did, when our office circulated to the municipality, again, this is speaking to conditions for severance, not the zoning this evening. So the conditions for severance was subject to parkland dedication and and any road transfers or municipal drains. So those are the 3 kind of conditions that will serve part of the severance approval. With respect to other agencies that we circulated to, the Sudbury District Health Unit also supported the severance for the installation of a septic tank and leaching bed system. Hydro One had no concerns with respect to the application this evening. And no other comments were received from the neighboring properties in objection or had any concerns with the zoning change. So again, this evening, my professional opinion that the provincial legislation as well as our local legislation, which includes the official plan and zoning bylaw for the municipality of French River, conforms and therefore can be supported from a plan perspective.
Thank you. I don't believe the applicant is with us tonight.
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay. And are no members of the public. And so council, any questions from council? No? All right. Since there's no further questions, I declare this public hearing to be concluded. And it's now in order for council members to make a motion and for council to consider the application. So I need a mover and a seconder. Willie and Dean.
It is duly moved and seconded. Be it resolved that bylaw 2023-12, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2014-23, as amended, Aurélie Nathalie Martel, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed.
All those in favor? Thank you. Please be advised that there is a 20-day appeal period during which time any person or public body may, no later than 20 days after the day of the giving of written notice as required by section 34-18 of the Planning Act is completed, appeal to the local planning appeal tribunal by filing with the clerk of the municipality a notice of appeal setting out the objection to the bylaw and the reasons in support of the objection, accompanied by the fee prescribed under the local planning appeal tribunal. During this appeal period, no building permit may be issued. All right. No other comments. I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Renee and Dean. All those in favor? Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, council and staff. Appreciate it.